How many people are moving their flights up? I've been hearing all the, me included. I also want to say hi to everyone who's joining us online. Our workshop is Holy Conversations, Death Discussions That Span Generations. So, both Reverend Denise and I are affiliated with, she is the moderator for Presbyterian's Older Adult Ministry Network, and I'm a member of the network, and so we are just happy to be with you. We wanted to just introduce ourselves a little more formally as to why we are talking to you about this topic. My name is Zena Regis, and I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and I just changed job like a week ago, and I don't quite know my new title, but we'll just say I'm the director of community engagement, but for an organization called Compassion and Choices, and a lot of the goodies are from Compassion and Choices. We're a national nonprofit dedicated to end-of-life issues, and I was the director of community engagement. Now I'm the director of the End-of-Life Consultation Center. And my background before that is I was a hospice chaplain for a very long time. I went to Columbia Seminary and just love to talk about these things. All right, Denise.
Hi, everybody. My name is Denise Shannon, and I am from the Denver, Colorado area. And as Zena said, I do moderate the Presbyterian organization that deals with older adult ministry, which is a great organization. And I think hopefully some of you got some of our resources here at the conference, so I'm glad to do that. My background is varied. I actually am a registered nurse and was for 30 years, and most of those 30 years was spent in hospice care. So I have also worked in the end-of-life system for a long time, and then had a midlife crisis at 50 and thought I should become a pastor instead. So I did. I went back to seminary, and so I do pastor a church of about 100 members in a little suburb of Denver called Westminster. But end-of-life issues have been always a passion of mine, and just talking about the idea of advanced directives and how important it is. And today I'll be sharing with you some ideas about that and why churches might be a really good place to put this into your ministry. So we'll talk a little bit about that later. So I'm really glad to be here. Thank you.
So I'd love to hear, both our in-person and online, what is one word you typically associate with advanced care planning? And I'll expand that to end-of-life planning as well. Anyway, please. Legal forms. Legal forms, yes.
Oh, wow.
That's 2 words.
But it works. Anybody else?
Most.
All right, that's advanced over there. Yes, love it. Most. Autonomy. Oh, I love that. You've been reading ahead. Anyone else? Anybody online?
Family.
Family. I love that. Often, and I can tell I'm in the right audience because often I hear like dread, just all of the words like uncomfortable, difficult. And one of the bees in my bonnet, and I'll try not to go way off my slides and script, but when I was a little baby, terrible hospice chaplain, when I first graduated from seminary, and I had read all these books about like what dying people want and like the conversations to have at the bedside. And when I would get there, and in my mind, I said, people have had all these conversations about end-of-life planning way before they get to hospice. Spoiler alert, people have not. And so just it happened so often that people were not having these conversations, even once they were in hospice. And so I said, we're not wrong. It's the process that's wrong. There's something about how we think about end-of-life planning and advanced care planning in this culture, starting with the legal and the financial and the medicalese and the legalese, that makes it really difficult when we need to start with our story and with our spirituality and with our community. And what I've found more and more is that when we start there, it's actually not the dreadful, uncomfortable conversation that that people often think it is. How did Jesus practice the art of end-of-life conversation? Anybody have any ideas?
He talked about his own death a lot.
Absolutely.
As people say things in the room, would you repeat them for the folks online, because they couldn't hear?
Oh, perfect. He talked about his death a lot. Anybody else? All right. That's exactly what it is. Jesus spoke openly about his death, even when he made it weird. You have his disciples being like, bruh, we're not trying to hear this. And interestingly, that's how most end-of-life conversations go. So when I was working as a hospice chaplain at the bedside, the patient would often want to talk about their death. And the family would be like, now the patient would be enrolled in hospice. But the patient would say, the family would say, that's not going to happen anytime soon. We don't need to talk about that. There's no reason to be involved in this conversation. You're going to be here for a lot longer. And I used to judge them a little bit because I'm like, hey, we're in hospice. But my dad, I do this work all the time. My dad came to me on a Monday, and his death was not expected, but he came to me on a Monday wanting me to know where all his paperwork was, everything, just in case anything happens, I want you to know. And I said, Dad, you're going to be here for a long time. That was just my first, we don't need to talk about this, even though we absolutely did. He died that Thursday. So while he had a heart attack, and so while we didn't know that his death, he felt it. And I'm having this Dad, why are we talking about this? But it's so difficult to talk to the ones we love about them not being with us anymore. But Jesus really modeled it, and in a very assertive way. Get behind me, Satan. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. So I always think about it whenever I'm not trying to have that conversation. I'm always reminded that Jesus spoke openly about his death, even when it was weird for the disciples. Jesus created a ritual of remembrance. We think about communion, and that really being his way of saying, this is how I want to be remembered when I'm not here in a bodily form. But this is something we do, depending on your congregation, your denomination, at least once a month. And we still think it's weird. There's this woman at my church. She has her funeral service planned down to the person, to the hymn, to the scripture. That when that person dies, she goes ahead and lets you know who is to be in there. And people think this is really weird. They're like, here she comes again with her binder, with all of the things. But I'm like, that is actually not in the same way. But Jesus had a ritual of remembrance and how he wanted to be remembered after his death. And in that conversation I had with my father, he said, anytime you go on a trip, take me with you. Take some of my ashes if it's somewhere I've never been and sprinkle a little bit there. And I think about that, like that ritual of remembrance and how that just, it's so beautiful to think about how you will be remembered once you are no longer here. What parts of you will live on beyond you? And my dad loved to travel. And so I think about that all the time. Actually, as I was making these slides, I ordered from Shutterfly these luggage tags for all my family. So anytime we're going somewhere, he's going with us because that was what he loved to do. He loved to travel. And so there's so much beauty in being creative and thinking about how do we want to be remembered after we're gone from here, if we let ourselves have that conversation. Oh, yes.
Just know that leaving a piece of your dad everywhere you go is illegal.
I know, it's okay.
Well, it is because I get that time, I get that a lot, in my setting, my work setting, and I always just, oh,
Oh, yes, thank you.
I'm sorry, I forgot. It's okay. Do I need to repeat that?
Yes, please.
I said that just remember that as you go on vacations, if you decide to leave your dad in some of the places, that is illegal. And I'm not saying you can't do it, but you do need to know you're breaking the law and.
Yes, no,
Yeah.
it's very true. My dad loved to cruise. That was one of those things. He loved to cruise. So for his birthday, this is going to be a very off-color story, but for his birthday, we celebrate his birthday every year. It's John Regis Day. And so typically we go on a trip together as a family, and my niece and the cruise was like, no, you can sprinkle his ashes from the cruise ship, but there's a process and all these things. And just make sure you get permission. My niece had a little too much to drink. She's way over 21, but she had a little too much to drink on the cruise ship. And she just was like, I was having a moment with Granddad, and he's in my mouth all over on the balcony because she didn't account for the wind. So yes, be very careful when you are leaving your loved one. And for that reason, my mother is like, go ahead and do a natural burial for me because I don't want y'all doing all this for me. Anyway, back to Jesus modeling advanced care planning. Jesus made provisions for his mother's care. So we have the beautiful scene between Jesus and his mother and the disciple whom he loved, saying, woman, here is your son and here is your mother. And I think about that as a beautiful modeling of like, how are we providing for the care of our loved ones after they're gone? And thinking about that however that makes sense for you. So, what is advanced care planning? Discussing and preparing for future decisions about medical care. Meaningful conversations with loved ones is the most important part of advanced care planning. And also sharing with the medical team. But I met with a researcher at the University of Birmingham who is doing research on how advanced directives are respected in healthcare facilities. And she said, what makes the biggest difference in getting goal concordant care, the care that's according to what you want, your wishes, and you're honored, is having a healthcare proxy or someone some advocate, healthcare advocate, who's going to get the care that you want. Because she said there's a big gulf in how hospital systems navigate advanced directives and all those things, but like who is there is your health advocate, your healthcare proxy. So having that conversation is important because I met so many people in my hospice career who would say, I have all my paperwork filled out. It's in a drawer at home that no one has ever seen, no one ever knows. And so it's very important to have that conversation. And so that's why we wanted to have this workshop about like, how do we actually have these talks? And then secondary is having these things in writing on legal documents, your advanced directives. So I'm going to turn it over to Denise to talk about all those things.
Come up here. So there are a lot of different things that we ask people to fill out when they're doing advanced care planning. And really the number one, as Zena was just saying, is really to have some kind of medical durable power of attorney. Who is going to speak for you when you cannot speak for yourself? And hopefully that is somebody that will honor your wishes, share your wishes as you would like them to be shared. So this is not necessarily your spouse. It is not necessarily a family member. I have a story about this. I have a sister-in-law who absolutely would not put any of her immediate family as her medical durable power of attorney because she knows that they will go against her wishes. And so she made me her medical power of attorney. But it's really important to remind people that it's not an automatic. So if you're in the hospital setting, it's not an automatic that your spouse gets to talk for you. Yes?
So this is a very contextual question. So my grandmother had Alzheimer's, and she made my uncle medical power of attorney, and he ended up having a heart attack before she passed. And so is there like an option where you can have a couple of people as medical power of attorney?
You can set that up. You can set it up with, I want, Uncle, Henry to be my first. And it's a great idea to put 2 or 3 if you have that ability. So absolutely, that would be very important.
A lot of problems later.
I bet it did. Yeah, very good question. So the question being that, should you have more than one, because that person that was made the medical durable power of attorney might pass before the actual person. So it is a good idea to have more than 1 or 2.
I just want to remind you to repeat for our folks online what he said, because they can't hear.
Right. Yeah. Anything else? Yes.
And if you don't have those documents, there is a legal order by which they will follow, and it may not be the ones you want. It'll go to wife. I mean, so the orders, there will be somebody assigned if you don't pick.
Sure.
It's important that you pick.
So she was saying that there is an order that places will use, and it could be different wherever you go. So it is important to make sure that you know that you have people picked that you want to be picked for that role. So. And then we have the most form, or sometimes, depending on the state, it's called the post form. So these are physician orders. Oftentimes they get filled out now for people who definitely are in nursing homes, nursing centers, skilled nursing centers. And these are actually our orders, and they include those questions about, do you want to be a DNR? Do you want to be artificially fed? And then it has some other things on there too. And when you have your physician sign it and you actually have it with you when you go to the hospital, they're orders, so they need to follow them. So every state has a different color. I don't know, ours is like lime green, so it stands out to everybody. But that's a really good directive as well, because it really does give some direction when you end up going to a hospital. This is what I want, and my doctor says, yeah, so please follow. Living wills, same type of thing, a way to know kind of your wishes for resuscitation. Lots of us think about DNR that, well, of course I want you to resuscitate me. Well, there's a lot of reasons why you may not want to be resuscitated. Age might be a factor, right, but there's other medical conditions that really the chances of recovering from CPR are actually quite low for most people, even the healthiest of us. So that's actually a very informed decision, and hopefully can have some conversations about that with your loved ones. That's really important. Yes?
So I've actually been working on a lot of these documents with my parents, and will medical places honor digital copies of them, or do they need to be physical copies?
I think it would depend. So the question is would places accept digital copies of these, or does it need to be the physical piece of paper? I think it would depend on the place.
Okay.
Because that's kind of where we're at. Everybody kind of does their own thing with it. So you'd have to ask. But it would make sense since we have digital medical records. It would be very helpful, right? Yes.
But don't they have to be notarized or anything like that?
In some states, so the forms themselves might need to be notarized. It depends on the state. So you have to check your state's legal needs for that. In Colorado, they don't. Actually, in Colorado, if you wanted to do an advance directive, you could write it on a piece of paper towel, and it's supposed to be legal. So, no, I haven't tried that yet, but supposedly that's as simple as it's supposed to be. So yeah, so check your own state for the legality of notarization. Yeah. Yeah, let's use the mic so that they can hear us online.
There's always, like everything, there's always weird, things that come up. Yeah, because it's individual, right? It's people's, it's individual. But a thing that I did have come up with, where someone did pick somebody else, we had all the paperwork, and it was all fine, But the person hadn't told their immediate family that they've given the POA to a non-family member, and then there were problems. It was just traumatic.
Yes.
It still did what they wanted, but the family was shocked and didn't know and was angry, and so you need to also have those conversations with everybody, really.
You absolutely
that
do.
That was a new one to me. I just had that last week.
Yeah, you definitely want to have conversations about what you've done, what you've written out, what you have, and who might be that person, and have the conversations with people so it's not a shock, because it could be. Yeah, if you're assuming it's going to be you.
Right.
Is power of attorney always medically durable? Or
No.
is there such a thing, is it divided into domains? Does there such a thing as financial power of attorney?
Yes.
Medical, so you could you might have identified someone as your POA, but not necessarily your medical POA?
Yes, that is true. And you have that choice to have somebody who might be more your advocate to be your medical durable power of attorney, and then you might have somebody who might be more adept at doing all the financial pieces of it, so you can have a financial durable power of attorney. My brother and I did that for my parents. I was the medical, he was the financial. For us, it worked wonderful because those were our kind of purviews, if you will, and so you can definitely do that.
As a follow-up question, is medical durable power of attorney and healthcare proxy, are those interchangeable terms?
No, they are not. They are different terms. A healthcare proxy is what you would use and what you would do if you did not have a medical durable power of attorney. So here's the process in a hospital. You've got somebody on life support, that there might be conversation about, are we going to continue life support or not continue life support? That person doesn't have a medical durable power of attorney. They need somebody to be that person. And so what would happen is you would list all the people you think would have an interest in being that person. And it's a very long process. I've done this in hospice care, is you have to call and you have to talk to all of the potential interested parties to say, we would like to make the healthcare proxy Susie. Is that okay with you? And you have to document that. Yes, yes. So ideally it should happen that way. In real life, it doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes they'll just go to the spouse or the mother or whoever that first person might be. Legally, that's not what should happen. But that sometimes is what happens depending on where you're at. So real life versus what should happen as well. Yes.
We have a comment online
Yes.
from Kelsey. She writes, more than the power of attorney and advanced directives, which I find are becoming more commonly known and understood, people I work with are navigating grieving the loss of their loved ones, along with all the stuff that goes along with it. Probate court, taxes, resolving water and electrical bills, Social Security, et cetera.
Absolutely, Kelsey. It is. This is but one piece, right, of all of that process. And when you're trying to, so you don't get to grieve right away oftentimes because there's stuff to do, right? The tasks of death, I call them. And so it becomes very difficult to do that. And that's why conversations are really helpful ahead of time. So I think it's really important.
And I want to say something very quickly to that. There's a new, and of course it has a cost, but there is a new industry burgeoning. I just went to their conference a few weeks ago, the after loss services professional. So you can hire someone to help you with those logistics of navigating probate court, closing accounts, all of that after death. And the network is the Professionals for After Loss Services, PALS. So anyway, if anybody ever needed
that's
that.
very helpful. Yeah, I did not know that. And then there's also the question of organ and tissue donation, which some of us, on my driver's license, you can put those, indicators. It's always good to include that in a living will if that's important to you. And there's a whole process that goes along with that after death, but good to know for sure. This is yours? No. Okay, you want me to do this one? So actually, there's really, I think it's a really important conversation to have because I think one of the conversations to have are around values and beliefs and what is important to that person. Because we don't all have those same values and beliefs, right? We don't all value life in the same way. We think about things in a different way, depending on our religion, maybe our culture, all of those things. And so it really goes deeper than just doing the form and just filling out the form. So it's really important to do that. And the reason why this is so important is that we all think that we want to live at home until we die, right? We don't want to go anywhere. We don't want to go to a nursing home. We don't want to go to assisted living. We want to live where we live. And the reality of that is actually a lot slimmer than what the want is, right? And so sometimes it's not possible to stay home. That's a lot of care that somebody might have to provide for you if you're not able to take care of yourself. And sometimes that's just not possible. Sometimes it is, and how wonderful, but it's not possible for most people. So having those types of conversations in this advanced care planning is really important as well. Of course, death is this, thing that kind of, there's no set time, there's no set way that we die. And our technology and our medical care makes us live longer. And so we also end up with a lot more deficits, right? The cognitive deficits or physical deficits that we're not really thinking about maybe at this period of time in our lives. So death is prolonged. Death is, out there for us, some of us, a lot longer than it used to be. And so it's really, really important. So fear comes into these decisions, being uninformed or misinformed. I think the number one place that I see misinformation is the idea that, somebody just has to do CPR on you and you'll be fine, right? But really, I don't even know what the newer percentage is, but really it actually is less than 5% of people live after CPR. So, and sometimes you might live and you may not be back to your normal baseline. You might just be alive. So there's important information to gain. You're influenced by others. Your family is a huge influencer, right? And just lack of communication amongst family members about this. Again, putting those forms, you may have done those forms and putting them in a drawer doesn't help anybody. So very, very important to do. So yeah, here's some of the values and beliefs, right? Some people want to go all out, and I think, if I was 30 and had cancer, and I have all my kids still at home, I probably would be in the cure, area, right? That would be my personal. As I get older, I might just want to be maintained, right? That maybe just, being okay, but not aggressive therapy in any way. Again, these are values that we all have, and we should take those into consideration. Quality of life versus quantity of life, right? So maybe you're 74, okay? Do you want another 20 years? Well, in order to get another 20 years, you might have to have aggressive treatment. If you'd rather have quality of life, then maybe that aggressive treatments, kind of those symptoms and all of those side effects that happen, maybe you don't want that. Do I see a hand? No. Information versus not knowing. Culturally, there's a lot of cultures that do this, right? It's only a certain person in that family that might need the information. A lot of times the cancer isn't even shared with the patient, that's what they have. So we have to be really aware of cultural differences in regards to that. And then just different religious and spiritual beliefs. What happens after death? What happens during death? What is important in those areas? But those are important conversations to have. And I think this is actually where I think churches and spiritual, organizations can be really helpful in this process, is spending time talking about the values and the beliefs around end of life and death, where people can really make informed decisions then. And I think we are primed for being able to have that kind of a conversation. Let's practice. What do you want to practice? Well, we're going to come back. I'm going to give you an idea of how you can incorporate that. So this is how can you engage your ministry in addressing this issue? So this was a little church that I pastored. I no longer pastor this church, but this is what we did. And 90% of the people in this church were over the age of, I want to say 80, probably. At that time, it says 75 there, but I want to say they were probably more over 80. Very small congregation, rural Colorado, farming community. They did wheat and they had dairy cows and things like that. And most of the people that came to church there were the women that were married to farmers. And so the farmers oftentimes did not come to church. But what I also found out is that this idea of talking about death and the things that they might want was foreign to them. They would have nothing to do with it. And so what I did is I thought, okay, let's do this in kind of, I called it a fun way. It probably wasn't fun for them, but it was a little bit fun way. I did kind of a resource fair. So I had some people come from the local hospices, the local home care agencies. I had somebody happen to Presbyterian Church, so I did have somebody come from the Presbyterian Foundation to talk about legacy giving. So it wasn't just about death and what you wanted as far as your care goes, but it was about other things that you could incorporate in these conversations. I had an elder law attorney who came and spoke about all of those different forms all those people. So we kind of had set it up as a ministry fair where people, so it was a little bit not overwhelming to them and not too scary because they could just go and talk to people as they would. I did speak as the pastor since I had the background in hospice care. I did talk about the importance of these forms and having them available and having them filled out. And so that wasn't as threatening, I don't think, because at least they knew me. And that went really well. We did invite the community, and there was about 35 people that attended. So this is a fairly small event, but I think this could be a big event. And I'm actually going to get ready to do the very same thing at my bigger church now that has about 100 members, and where I'm going to do the exact same thing. But it was a safe place for them. And I look at it as most of the time, if they have been long-term members of your church, it's a safer place to have these conversations. It might be even safer and less intimidating than having them with their family. So So that's why I think that churches are prime places that really can help have these conversations and get people thinking about them. So it was a really great place, great questions. And I think because they felt a little bit safer, the people in the room were people that they knew very, very well and they did life with. Excuse me. And so it really went over really well. And we actually took some time and we had people think about who their MDPOA would be if they didn't already have one. And we actually had MDPOA forms and they could fill them out. And again, in Colorado, you don't have to have them notarized. So I didn't have to have anybody there to do that, but they filled them out and they got to take them home with them. So when they left, they had one piece of their advanced directives completed. Of course, we really encourage you have to have a conversation with your family about this, especially if it's not the person who might think they're going to be that person. So it's a really easy way. It didn't take a lot of time. It didn't take a lot of effort, but it went over really well. And so I encourage you to think about that as one way of doing ministry in your church, that this is something that you can offer. Yes, Zena.
When you say they're filling out those documents and they have it when they leave, particularly if it's like, well, whoever it is, I would encourage you to ask the person, can I make you do this? And just saying, oh, by the way,
absolutely.
I've made you in charge of making all my end-of-life decisions.
It's a very good point. Yes.
Because there might be people, I don't want to make that decision.
Yeah. So I think I don't know if that mic is on very well, but the comment was that to make sure that who you're putting down as your MDPOA agrees to do so. So very good reminder for that. So yeah, don't just pick your best friend and then never tell them, because they might not want to be. You should always have asked. But it was good because actually, interestingly enough, again, it's a small community. Everybody knows each other. Some of them asked each other because they didn't have spouses or people in the area to do that for them anymore. So absolutely, very important. So I also then did a monthly newsletter, very simple newsletter, and also put little tidbits in our bulletin each Sunday about this, about remember, like a little remembrance, Have you done your MDPOA? Have you talked to them? Have you talked to your doctor about your wishes? Have you given him a copy of So I would have these little bullets for about the next, 3 or 4 months in the bulletin and then also in the newsletter. So that was the kind of follow-up that I did. I think it decreases the fear of the unknown for people. And I think what I really like about it is it brings the church into this conversation. It brings the idea of values and beliefs and our spirituality into these decisions instead of just having them be willy-nilly decisions that seem very overwhelming. So again, a really good reason to bring it into your churches. And this is really a significant issue. If you ask people what they're afraid of or what seems to be on their minds, at this age, a lot of people will say this. I don't know what to plan for. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't know how I should get ready. I just became a pastor of a church in September, and that's what I started to hear. And all of my people are over the age of 55. So everybody in just different ages were like, what should I be doing right now? What are the things that I should do? So I think if we ask that question, we'd find out that a lot of people have that on their minds, I think. So it also builds partnerships with your local organizations. So having those partnerships of hospices and home health agencies, maybe retirement communities that are in your neighborhood, all of those things are great ways to partner with people so that when your parishioners or your congregation members are in need of something, there's a way that you can refer them. So developing those relationships is also a really great thing. This you? Yep.
So when should we revisit our advanced care planning documents? One of what we say as an organization is the D's. When there's a diagnosis. So if you have a diagnosis of any kind that could be life-limiting or terminal, that's important to revisit your advanced care planning. But we also say every decade. It's really, just some people do it every year. We have a board member who came to us because she said her father every Thanksgiving would get out all of his documents and say, here it is, and here we need to do. And she just said that was such good modeling. But we say at least every decade. We also say when there's a divorce. If there's a divorce of any kind, or that's an important time. So just regularly doing it. I think getting in the habit of revisiting them, because that's often what happens is people will do them and then they just kind of sit and they're never changed. So setting a cadence for yourself to look over it and say, is everybody that I've named here still who I want to have named? Have any of my decisions changed? All those things, just getting in the habit of revisiting those. Thinking about advanced care plan beyond standard documents. So part of my work with Compassion and Choices, I work in a lot of communities who have low hospice utilization rates or who do not typically. Let me just start by saying, no one does advanced care planning well, no matter what community, what socioeconomic background. That's just not something we look at. But there are communities who have even less access to information about advanced care planning. And so one of the things I started thinking about in my conversations with with our different partners is, where do we see advanced care planning happening that doesn't look standard? And how can we expand that conversation? So one of the things is, I was talking to this woman and she was saying, I'm a single mom. I just need to make sure everybody has my password, my trusted person has the passwords I need, has information about what needs to be done. So I have a shared password protected Google Doc with my sister and my best friend. And I thought that was brilliant. That's advanced care planning. And I've been telling people that, and they're like, yeah, I do have it in a drawer. I should probably put it in my Google Docs and find out a way to do it. And there are lots of organizations and companies that are finding ways to do this better digitally than a Google Doc, but I think that is an amazing start, at least where you can tell people where to look, where it is, what information. And we're moving to this. I went to a whole workshop recently on our digital estate. And that is going to become a bigger and bigger issue in the next few years, because think about how many accounts you have. This is a little bit of an aside, but I have never thought about this. But when I mentioned the PALS conference, the Professionals for After Loss Services, and one of them talked about a father who lost his daughter. She was only 28. He called her to take down her dating accounts. Because what they're finding is people clone accounts. They'll find out someone died, clone those accounts, and use them for fraud. And so through this work, her name is Rachel Donnelly, the after loss professional. She learned that Tinder did not have a policy for when someone died, how to get that account down. And so she helped them create one. And so this is a new kind of wild, wild west for thinking about how do we manage a digital estate. I have a question here.
My question is more of a comment, which is that I really don't feel like this mic is turned on. It is?
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, cool. That I recently watched a YouTube video. I'm a big fan of the good death as a concept, and I really enjoy Caitlin Doty. She's a YouTuber and a mortician. And she made a video recently about the first criminal court case that featured an AI testimony. and it was an AI testimony. Like basically, the wife created a deep fake of her husband, and he testified on his own behalf after he'd been murdered or something. And so in the video, Caitlin, the person who made the video, is like, I think she was doing this as a way of grieving and like processing her grief, but then it had an outcome in this trial, and like probably it made the court like rule more firmly because it was like a personal testimony. And so anyways, just something else to consider that I think perhaps is not necessarily on the landscape, especially for folks who are not as in the know about AI, but.
That is so fascinating. I'm going to find that video because I'm very interested to know more about that. Just a new landscape.
Comment, you were talking about digital, but if you're talking about your congregation right now that are in their 70s and 80s, we have digital as far as our bank accounts and all of those kinds of things, but we are used to the paper. And if you are in a state where it has to be notarized, I know some of my forms had to be notarized, a place to put it where people know. Last fall, a lady told me about a box that's called a knock box next of kin. And it's supposed to guide you as to put everything there. Now, my family laughed, but I gave my husband one for Christmas. I said, honey, this is not for you, it's for the rest of us, and we hope that you will fill it out and we won't need it for a long time. And the truth is, we both need to do it. He has got it all filed, and he thinks we know exactly where everything is. And we keep telling him, no, we don't. And so, that was a baby step, but that was a knock next of kin box. You can get it on Amazon.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
It was actually developed in Colorado. I know the lady who did it. So it's actually an incredibly helpful tool because it's not just for these types of decisions, but it's also for where's your life insurance policies, where's your whatever, all of the other things, right? Passwords and important papers. And there's a way of filing them so that somebody can find them. So absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Another way we saw it happening was voice memos. People saying, I remember when I was working in hospice, it was a woman saying, I'm tired of my kids fighting, so I'm making a voice memo with my voice of everything I want done. Now, it's not the same as an advance directive, but it silenced some of the children. And so, so those things, that's how we see advanced care planning happening. People taking a video. We have phones everywhere, so it can be very helpful. People will often take videos of what they want, their will. I want this person to have this car. Binders and notebooks. I was at an Episcopal version of this conference in Baltimore, and this very young man came up to me and he said, I know all about end-of-life planning because my mom has a binder and she updates it every time she goes to somebody's funeral and she doesn't like what they did. She puts a new page in there to say, don't do this at my funeral. He said there's this big binder that sits in our living room full of all of her end-of-life wishes. So that's another way that people are doing it. In their family Bibles, people writing notes in there. I've seen that, because that's something that's passed down. It can be an heirloom for many people. Family meetings, people just having these meetings to talk about what they want. And so part of my work, which I've enjoyed, is to be like, okay, we have these things. How do we standardize them? How do we put the form? But I actually like this starting place more for people because people are like, oh, I've done this already. When the legalese and the medical jargon and all of that make people feel so uncomfortable, it's helpful to be able to point to, no, you've already done parts of this, and let's talk it through. Another thing that I'm really seeing a lot of people doing and thinking about is decluttering and downsizing, because we are moving into this world where people just don't want our stuff. And I would, as a bereavement coordinator for a hospice, I would call people and say, how are you doing after the loss of your loved one? And they would say, I wish I could be grieving, but I'm going through their stuff. So I'm actually a little bit mad at them for keeping all of these things. And so I've been working with an org to develop a resource on like, how can we use decluttering as an advanced care planning process? Like, you can start having these conversations through the things, through the parties that you're having to say, okay, everybody take this. One of my favorite stories is one of my patients was a big reader. And one of the things she decided to do was write notes in all of the books that she loved the most. And she gave them away at her funeral. So everybody had this book, and the family was like, thank goodness, because everybody can take a book. That's one less thing we have to haul away. So, you know, having these thought process, and this is something that I think we're going to be having more and more conversations about. Last year I went to the American Society on Aging conference, and there was it was probably a quarter of this room about a breakout session about hoarding and decluttering. There was standing room only. And so that was one of my feedback. This needs to be on the main stage next year because this is what people are thinking about. It's so easy to have so much stuff. And so that's something that's not that we think about in standard documents, but absolutely is a part of our advanced care planning process.
So I live and serve here in Pittsburgh, and thinking about the decluttering, I drive all around the region, and I have seen the amount of long-term storage unit buildings quadruple or quintuple in just the past couple of years. And that is one of the things that I've been thinking about is like, who is going to clean those out? Because it's wild. And a lot of it, in fact, that my dad is a hoarder. And I'm like, I don't want to deal with that, but I know I'm going to have to.
Yeah, absolutely. I've done this little thing with some of my friends since I do this work all the time. I'm like, let's have a family meeting via Zoom to start talking about these things. And I'll facilitate because they're like, I don't know how to talk to my mom about this, but she'll listen to you. But in every meeting that I've had like that, stuff has been brought up. They're like, it's a little gentle, like, do you want to start cleaning out the basement together so that, or the attic or whatever. So anyway. Yeah.
And it's not just the decluttering of this, well, it's the stuff we don't want, but it's probably a little more of a generational thing, but people's collections, and what we've started doing at the facility where I work, and I do take credit for starting it because I was one of those children. My mother had a collection of miniature pianos. We're like 120 miniature pianos, right? But I took them to the wake and to the memorial service. Everybody take a piano. Remember my mother, So now we have had bird collections. We have had yadros. Just whatever people have collected, because it was very important to that person, but you may not want them all, yet many people might take one to remember that person. So it's like the collections.
Absolutely. That's such a good idea. And I think this is, when we start having these discussions in community, people think of, oh my goodness, I can do this, I can do that. And so that's why another reason I think it's so important to have these conversations in our faith communities. A church that Evan is very familiar with, Hillside Presbyterian Church, they had a Getting Our House in Order series. And it was like 4 sessions about end-of-life planning and preparedness. But I've seen every time I visited the congregation since then, there's a shared language around advanced care planning and end-of-life conversations. And so they'll say, Zena, Miss Bernice said she was going to do this, but she has not. So get on her about this. Or Miss Anna, but like they're just more comfortable talking about it because they've had these structured ways of talking about it. Or she said she was going to get her family together to talk about her end-of-life plans. They didn't talk about it. And so anyway, I love that.
So you were talking about faith communities being great models for a lot of these things. Churches especially, I don't know about other faith traditions in their spaces, but a lot of the churches I've been involved in, they're not great at decluttering themselves. So how do we model that in our own space, in our own faith community spaces?
That's such, I have a thought, but Melissa, please go.
This is probably something you can Google because I'm not going to remember the name of it, but Ann Patchett, she writes novels. Like
Yes.
and stuff. She wrote a really good article during COVID on this topic, and I used it in a session retreat where we were talking about kind of decluttering, not just the stuff in our congregation, but kind of as a metaphor for pruning, like the amount of things we were trying to do. But I would commend that article. It was just so down to earth. Her writing is so good. I think it started because her best friend's father had passed away while everything was shut down. So they were like using that time to clean out his house, and it made her reconsider her own collections.
Oh,
Patchett. I think that's it. Ann Patchett. Yeah.
I love that. I'll have to look for that. Yes. There's a.
We were just going through we pulled everything out of every closet in our church because we were looking to rent certain spaces. But we have a professional organizer who is a member of our church. So hire one. They're out there. They can be pricey, but check your people. Somebody actually might just have this skill in general. And she helped us lay everything out. And then it was, stickers of keep, donate. We have to ask somebody for this because we don't know maybe it was handmade. So if it was handmade, do we know who it is? Are they still here? Is the family here? Does the family want it? If it was none of those, it left. I understand that it left. It meant something for a long time, but that person is either gone or their family's gone and no longer around, and no one knows who Phyllis is that did this embroidery on the wall anymore. So now the meaning is gone. But then it helped us get everything out. Then we repackaged everything. We're like, these are the things we needed. And then during Christmas, we went through more stuff because Christmas is, a lot. And then tried to redo that. And then we have one space that all of those things are now at. And then it did make us redo some things and also be like, what can we replace? And are there things that we want but are too expensive to replace but may not be using it right now? And is there a place to store it? And that does mean that you might have to clean out all the nooks and crannies in your church and you find weird crap.
Yeah, that's amazing. I am on the older adult ministry team at Columbia for their lifelong learning older adult ministry certificate. And in my class, everyone gets to do an end of course project. And someone's project in the last term, which I thought was wonderful, and I said, please make this available to everybody, was a downsizing of the church liturgy. And so she had a service where they blessed all of the things and all of the memories of all of the stuff. And then it was kind of freeing to get rid of it because it's the memories, it's the acknowledgement, it's the people wanting to be seen. And I just thought that was such a beautiful, beautiful service because she said they were having the same issue, like just having stuff and people being like, no, you can't get rid of that. In 1984, the kids made that. So please do not get rid of it. And so she just wanted a way to really call it all holy, but also say we can get rid of it now.
Is that publicly available?
You know what? I will ask her if I can share it with everybody in this class. It's not yet, but I've been trying to figure out a way to make it available because there were so many beautiful services and liturgies like that people made in the class that I said, oh, we all need. Along the lines of creative acts of advanced care planning, and just getting people in the thinking about it, is storytelling and testimony. Often people just want to tell their story. In most workshops that I do about advanced care planning, where it's a straight intro, I'll ask people, tell me about a good death you've seen. And that sparks it. And people who haven't wanted to talk about it before will say, my aunt had a really good death. And then you say, what made it a good death? And usually it's the things that we all want some agency, some planning, some preparation, some reconciliation. It's just good to think about the themes that come up in the good death. And most of the themes are very similar. And then and then you might even ask, what's a bad death that you've seen? And usually it's unpreparedness, there's people fighting, people didn't have control or agency at the end of life. It's all of these things. Decisions weren't made, so it was all chaotic. And so using those themes of people's stories can really help move the conversation forward. Also thinking about blessings and liturgies and gratitude circles and music and art as ways to get the conversation started. I was just interested to see how art could move this conversation forward, so I wrote a short play about a woman making her decisions about end of life, and I showed it, and someone mentioned it today that because they had seen it, and I saw someone ran into them, and they said, "Have you done anything with that play? It really got me thinking about XYZ." I don't think it was an especially brilliant play, but there's something about watching other people do it that gives people permission to do it, and then sparks conversation. So then we had a little talk back afterwards, and people were able to be like, oh, I related when the character said this, or, oh, that made me think about I need to have that conversation with this family member. So, and there's so much music and art and poetry out there to start those conversations. Also thinking about our spiritual and ethical wills, there are so many amazing books to think about. What do you want to leave beyond you in the spiritual realm? And so when I see congregations really struggling about, this is a hard conversation, no one wants to talk about it, sometimes I'll get us to start thinking about, well, what do we want to put in our spiritual wills? What of your faith do you want to make sure that your grandchildren have and your great-grandchildren have and the great-grandchildren of this congregation? And so sometimes that will bring up a lot of things to get people started thinking about this. And Denise mentioned this, sometimes it's just really helpful, not just spiritual care practitioners, but sometimes chaplains can be a great resource. Partnering with chaplains in your community that are already doing hospice work can be a great place to start because they talk about these things all the time. All right. I think we have way more time than I expected, but I will go through these and then we can have some more conversation. Denise, do you want to talk a little bit about POAM?
Sure.
So POAM stands for the Presbyterian Older Adult Ministry Network. It has actually been a part of the overall collective under the PCUSA for actually 40 years. Has everybody heard of this organization? Yeah, see, I'm seeing some that have, some haven't. So how I got involved is I had never heard of this organization. And I was Googling one day something about wanting to do an activity with my folks in the church that I kind of talked about a little bit earlier. And I was Googling and this came up. And I went, Presbyterian? Like, I'm a Presbyterian pastor. And I'm like going to the website and I had no idea that this organization existed. And it's a wonderful organization that is full of resources for you. And there are actually resources for you in regards to this particular subject matter as well. Hundreds of quick sheets, hundreds of resources of how to do things, how to put things together. And of course, it has lots of other things too, lots of intergenerational type of activities. So it's an organization that's there for you. Everything on our website right now is free. There is a ton of videos that we did about a year ago that came out, and it comes out with discussion guides and resource guides for you. So it basically is done for you, something you can download for free. So that's a QR code to the website. And you can just, it is a organization that is for you in this area that can be very helpful. It really does. Anything you can almost think about, you can go here and I bet you will find something that will be helpful for you. So we do have membership. You can read about that on the website. And we also are always looking for people who might want to work with us we have several work groups. We have an education resource and training work group that does nothing but we have a yearly conference, which is coming up in September in Knoxville, Tennessee. And we also do a ton of webinars, a ton of, creation of resources. So that's a whole work group that works on those. We have a connectivity work group that works on how do we connect with people? How do we let people know that we even exist? That's been our biggest challenge. Because there's more and more people who said, I've never heard of you, which is crazy, especially if you've been in the Presbyterian Church for a long time. It's something you should probably hear about, I thought. And then we have a partnership work group. And so we partner with other denominations and other groups, organizations, to also not recreate the wheel, but what other resources do they have that we can also offer? And we have a great partnership going on with the UCC Church, the Methodist Church, and the Episcopal Church at the moment. So it's really nice. There's a lot going out there on older adult ministry. So I encourage you to just take a look and see how that can be helpful to you.
Some of you on your tables have I think everybody, well, we need to get you one, have a Faith at the Threshold toolkit. And I only have a few printed copies, but please take them. I don't want to take anything home. But this is a Faith at the Threshold toolkit that I created at the organization I work for, Compassion and Choices, with our Faith Leadership Council. And it's just some of the ideas that we talked about compiled in there to get us talking about, because we really do know that clergy, chaplains are uniquely qualified to talk about end-of-life issues, and often that's who people go to first. And so this came from my Faith Leadership Council saying, people are always coming to me to ask about or for me to mediate end-of-life conflict. And I would really like to be proactive about it. So can you give me some things to talk about it? So that's what this toolkit is. And along those lines, Compassion and Choices has a Dementia Values and Priorities tool. And that is to talk about what you would want your end-of-life care to look like before a dementia diagnosis. That is a concern that we saw from so many people of saying, like, when I'm not able to speak for myself, I know someone else is going to speak for me, but I want to make sure I've really thought through how I want them to honor my wishes. So that's where the Dementia Values and Priorities tool comes from. And also we have the End of Life Decisions Guide. Those are also on the table. And exactly as Denise said, we have a values worksheet in there. And that's my favorite place to start. I think it's right at the middle, is because often I remember reading that we are terrible at planning for our future self, not even for our dying self, but just for our future self. That is why I always say night Zena is a terrible person to the next morning Zena, because there are so many things that I need to do. I'm like, I don't need to be up scrolling. I need to do some meal prep. I need to do all these things, but I just don't do it and then I know neuroscientists say we see our future self like a stranger. It's just really hard to relate to who we will be in a week or a year or even 10 years. And so I think that's another reason why end-of-life planning is so difficult. And so, who we are is our values. So I always think starting with our values is such an important place to start, because those we know, for the most part, are who our values are. And so I really encourage people to look through the values worksheet and think about, like, what are my values at the end of life? I'll say another thing that we do, and please call me, email me. I'll make sure everybody has my information. Compassion and Choices is also one of our issues is access around medical aid in dying. No matter how you feel about medical aid in dying, it is something that is coming if it's not already in your state. And so I've really been encouraging clergy to think about medical aid in dying and how they can help people around that and navigate that process. And so there's a lot of information on our website too about medical aid in dying access. We have 3 states who just got authorized: Illinois, Delaware, and possibly New York. That are coming up in 2026. And so this is a conversation that I'm seeing more and more in more and more faith communities, talking about it, dealing with it. I just had a pastor call and tell me, I knew my congregant was doing it. No one else in my congregation knows. I was there at the death and I'm having grief around it. But I'm happy I was there to honor their wishes, but I just want to talk more about it. And so I think those conversations will be happening more and more and more. And so I just think it's important for us to be talking about that.
Can I just share? So I had a parishioner, 98 years old, who I was visiting. She was on hospice care. And she brought this conversation up. So it's not because they're too old to have this conversation, but she certainly was in a where she was with her medical, state was she did not want to live like this. And she was 98, and she was talking to me about this. She had not talked about it with anybody else, and so it was also an opportunity for a pastor to have a pastoral conversation about this. Why are you thinking about this? Why are you, what do you know about this? And she really, really, really wanted to do that. And so, they were walking through that process. And then one day I went to visit her and she goes, I've changed my mind. And I said, okay. And she said, yeah, she goes, my family just can't handle that. And I just can't do that to them. So it was this other opportunity to have a conversation that was really, personal to her, but really opened up, what are your values? What are your beliefs? The importance of your family and all of those things. But I just don't pretend that our 98-year-olds don't know about it and aren't going to have this conversation. And that was only 6 months ago. And she did pass away. Natural causes. She did not participate in medical aid in dying, but she had lots of conversation about it. Yeah.
Yeah, similarly, in our, I mentioned I just took over directing our end-of-life consultation center. VSED is voluntarily stopping eating and drinking, and that's another thing that people do to end their lives. And I want to say about 50% of my calls have been about VSED because people are saying, I'm just tired of living like this. I'm in pain. I'm dealing with a chronic illness, all those things. And so these are things that people are thinking about. And in taking over this line, it's a warm line. People leave messages and then we call them back. They might have in the message a very simple question. Is this legal in my state? But what I realize is people don't have the space to talk about these things often with people they trust or just a space. And so often this one question will turn into an hour conversation because people are like, oh, I'm finally able to talk about this without being judged or without being rushed. And so I think that's why it's so important for us as faith leaders to really be a space for people to be able to talk about these things that they're thinking about, that we all think about and grapple with our mortality, and just to be a space for that can happen. All right. Want to practice?
Do you want to do the death deck?
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I actually think this is the wrong QR code, so ignore that. But there is a death deck on your table or a dementia deck. And we are Compassionate Choices is partnering with the Death Deck. And I just want everyone to have one because it can be I'm just amazed by the conversations that happen. There's something about the cards that make it a much easier conversation, that people are like, oh, it feels like a game almost. And so I have been in spaces where I wouldn't think that this conversation would go over well, But the minute I break out the cards, people are like, hey, what do you think about this question? Or in there, some of them are a little cheeky answers. And so it just gets people thinking in an almost lighthearted way about something that's very serious. So there are lots and lots of decks that are coming out around this conversation. And so this can be a great tool, and it can lean into like across generations. It's a conversation you can have. I often, when I'm doing a talk, will put a few cards on the table as a little icebreaker, and the conversations get spirited. And there's something about talking about death that makes things really deep, really quickly. And so people, once they get over the initial ick factor or just discomfort, it gets really, really deep. And so I really encourage you, there's a larger deck that you can get on Amazon. I hate to plug Amazon, but I feel like everything's on Amazon of the death deck. But there's also a death doula friend of mine just came out with Table Talk, and it's all about end of life concerns. And so it's a great thing to just, it's a good way to enter the conversation and to be thinking about it. Yeah, I love that.
Let's see. Does somebody have a deck that we can open maybe and just try one? That'd be awesome. Is that open? Yeah. All right. Well, that's a dimension deck. Do you have one that's open?
Do you have any more of the dimensional ones? I didn't get anything.
Yeah, let's just pick one like this, huh? Okay. All right. All right. Organ donation is A, real chance to save someone's life. I'm totally in. That's one answer. B, I thought I've been carrying around in my head, but have yet to put it in writing. And C, on the off chance I need them afterward, I just can't do it. I'm not sure why you need your organs after death, but okay. So, well, yeah, right? So, all right, so what's your answer? A? Yeah? I don't know. Might need that liver. No, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. So, but I bet you could have some interesting conversations about that one. Let's see if there's a little bit deeper one. But you could start, exactly. Expect. All right, here we go. You're approaching the end of your life. Others are making your healthcare decisions for you. Should price factor in? Ooh. A, yes. Please don't blow through my savings to prolong the inevitable. B, in moderation, necessary expenses are okay. Or C, spare no expense buying me every single second I have. So this is kind of about that futility of care, right? Of we're keeping people alive, or what purpose, right? And again, this is where I think those conversations about values, beliefs, cultural considerations all come into play, right? Because it could be very different for every single one of you in here, what your answer might be about that, right? So, we're pretty famous in Colorado for a governor that said, the aged have a duty to die. That was many years ago. I don't even remember, 70s, 80s, I don't remember, but Governor Lamb, yes, and that was very controversial, right? That the older people have a duty to die. We don't have money to take care of you. We don't have money to keep you alive. So thinking about those types of things, right? What other things might come up if you were to read this card? Do you think? Yes.
The ability to be kept alive by machine is unique to the first world and particular countries within the first world. It is not a universal experience. And for me, it brings up a lot of ethical questions about, do I deserve, by dint of having been born here, to have a different length and quality of life than someone who was born in another part of the world? So to what extent should I be kept alive for $10,000 a day or more when that could ostensibly, I mean, it doesn't work like that, right? It's not a direct exchange, but it's kind of a first world problem, to be honest, because in some places it's not an option.
I love that. But see how deep that got real fast, right? So, I mean, because it is, So,
It's not even just this country, people within this country.
yes. Yeah. So it's not even just this country, but it's, not even all the people within this country have that option ever.
Going a little different direction, I'm a parent who has an adult of level 2 autism child. And so when I think about, certainly have been preparing for his care, but thinking about that transition for him and what are the things that need to take place that haven't already? Are there legal things I need to take care of before that happens? Is my spouse okay? Because if he's okay, yeah, that's fine. Go ahead, I'm all good. But those pieces of your responsibilities that maybe we don't often think of in life for family members in different ways.
Thoughts?
I'm really intrigued by death doulas, which is kind of a newer thing. And I'm curious to know what you know about them, your experiences with them. I don't know. I can't tell if it's hippy dippy. I don't even know the right term. I can't tell. I just don't know enough about this thing. I'm not sure how I feel about a birth doula, let alone a death doula. So I'm just not.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm actually wanting to become a death doula. And I'm also in the ordination process as well, because I think for where I'm being called is a lot of, I've seen a lot of death. I've had to help people process a lot of grief and feels around that. The death doula practices, it depends on the state, whether there's certification. It depends, like my mom, she actually went ahead and did the certification through University of Vermont. They have a wonderful certification, but there's also like a couple of different national and international organizations. So it's depending on who you're asking. It can be hippy dippy, or it can be like an actual, like you're working with the medical field, like working specifically with hospice, working with churches. It kind of, there's no one way from what I've experienced, but there's also no bad way depending on your context.
I have become a huge fan of death doulas. I work closely with a lot of them through my work at Compassion and Choices. But it, just like you said, there's a gulf in like how the training is, how they're integrated with hospice care, all of the things. And so what I will say is one of my good friends and who's on our council, faith council, is Ashley Johnson, and she's the president of the National End of Life Doula Association, NEDA. And so they are working to standardize or just have some guidelines, because there's a big gulf. Like she was telling me one day, there's a death doula who can go through a weekend training and be a certified death doula. But there are also certification programs that take years. and have lots of practicum hours that involve volunteering with a hospice program and all of the things. And so it's really important. I do think death doulas can be an incredible asset in the dying process, just given. And I'm a person who loves hospice. So I'm gonna say this, I love hospice, but I think there was a study that like, when people are on hospice, in total, there might be an hour spent per week between all the disciplines with the patient. Just given, depending on, and that can vary greatly, like with who's doing the hospice care, if it's a for-profit, a nonprofit, how many patients are on the census, all of these things. But people sign on to hospice thinking they're getting a whole lot of care, and it can just vary greatly based on hospice agency and all of those things. And so often doulas can help kind of fill that gap, and that sounds dismissive because it's more than that, but do some really important work that people need. And there are doulas in the death doula spectrum who do all kinds of things, from end-of-life preparedness to actual bedside, hands-on. I was talking with a doula in Colorado who her specialty is to help families plan VSED and medical aid in dying, and being the person to help them do that. So making sure that if you have a doula, that you know what their training is and what they're comfortable doing. I also know a lot of hospice nurses and hospice chaplains and social workers who have started their own doula practices because of what they have seen with the limitations in hospice care. Yes.
Yes.
Another online comment from Nona. She writes, working with college students a few years ago when death cafes were a thing. We had one, and it was one of the richest conversations we ever had. As part of the series, we each wrote our own obituaries. It was a powerful way for college students to claim their hopes and values as they looked ahead at their lives.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. And death cafes are still a thing, at least in Colorado. They happen all the time, pretty much every day of the week. So a death cafe, it's kind of an opportunity to come together in community to talk about death, to talk about these very questions that we talked about today, or something, or an aspect, or maybe something that's happened in the news around death and decision making and things like that. But it's a very popular thing, at least where I live, and has been around for quite some time. And I'm going to turn it over, but death doulas, actually seminaries now are starting to have certification programs. Iliff School of Theology in Colorado does now, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even think about this, but I'm wondering, when you talk about death doulas, it crossed my mind. This past year, well, it's been about 3 years I've been doing it, but I'm certified as an end-of-life coach, grief and end-of-life coach. And I was told that you can work with hospice. And so I'm just wondering, what's your experience working? Because you're probably, you might be familiar, I see you shaking your head, that is something that more recently, I just remember just beginning the class, not being aware of what was going to be happening. It was like, he said, you got to download this app that says, you're alive, you're not dead. And I'm like, I'm not playing that every day. But I find myself being very thankful that I'm alive every day. So I'm wondering if you have experience with that and how you've incorporated end-of-life coaches in the hospice setting.
Yeah. I don't have a lot of experience, but I just love this name, Doulapalooza. It was in New Orleans last month. And there was a panel of end-of-life coaches who were talking about their different programs and how they got into that. And that a lot of them were just approaching hospices to say, all hospices have to have hospice volunteers. And so they were offering their services. And so there was a lively conversation about if they could ever get paid because they're doing a lot of work. But a lot of them are working with hospices to get that experience. And also in hospice at bedside, and also bereavement coordination, because hospices have to offer 13 months of grief support. And so they found that was a really great role. Yes. I see 2 hands, and we are running out of time, but this has been amazing. And
I just want to offer one thought that also death doulas don't just do pre and at bedside care. but they also do post-death care. They do a lot of grief work with the families and friends.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's such a good point.
So I think, yeah, it's another resource for people, I think, to have.
I mean, I have something, but. I was just, and I know this is different than doula, the death doulas, but do you have any experience with or familiar with No One Dies Alone program, the NODA? And how has that worked in situations? And if you wanted to explain that.
Yes, I know it through a hospice that I worked for that was a part of that program. And so they had vigil volunteers that would hold vigil with patients who were dying and were alone. And so that's I don't know a whole lot other than that.
We have it at the hospital, where I used to serve as a chaplain. We did do it at the hospital, but we provided it, and that was the best service for it. For when families are keeping a vigil, and a part of their vigil sense of, well, that's what a vigil is, that somebody's got to be there 24/7, but they need a break. And so you have, there's a program, it's called NODA, No One Dies Alone, and you just notify them, I would like to be away from the bedside from, 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. tonight, and a volunteer would just come and I will sit with your loved one.
Yeah, that's lovely.
We actually, the hospice I used to work for had what we call 11th hour vigil volunteers. So that's exactly what would happen when people were actively dying. We actually would provide a volunteer to always be at the bedside. And so nobody would die without somebody if the family was wanting that.
I love that.
Right. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So are we out of time?
We're at, but I want to make
One
sure, 'cause
more?
I think did you have a question? Okay.
One more.
I'm in North Carolina, and in one of the local queer bars, they have a queer death club that meets monthly, and they meet and they have kind of communitively death doula'd for some folks who were in the end of life stage, who were members of the club that would come, and so they would help them in their different needs, and then they did a shroud making workshop, and just have general conversations and stuff, and it's been really meaningful to see that. I've only been able to participate a couple of times, but it meets monthly, and I think it's a very cool thing.
I love that. I very quickly, I know everybody needs to go, but one of my colleagues on my team is our LGBTQIA engagement director, and we've had lots of conversations because we have an LGBTQ leadership council talking about how one of our council members was not just because of this, but a lot of, they're always we are so much further ahead in talking about death than y'all are, than a lot of the straight folks are, because of the impact of HIV/AIDS on our communities, because of chosen family, all of those things. And so we have a queering death event that we do each year that, anyway, that's amazing. And that's I love it. So
come talk to her about it.
Yes, please come talk to me about it. And please stay in touch. My email is, I should have had it on the slide, but it's Zeena, ZEENA.Regis, REGIS @gmail.com. I love to have these conversations. I have a little faith engagement budget where I get to go to churches and talk about these things. So please, please, please keep in touch.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you.